Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 8. Percy Fawcett's Lost Items. Colonel Percy Fawcett was one of the greatest British archaeologists who ever lived. He was born in 1867 in England, and when he was of age, he served in the Royal Artillery, traveling to faraway places like Sri Lanka and North Africa. He was briefly with the British Secret Service, where he learned how to be a surveyor. He was even good friends with Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. Percy Fawcett was a smart, ambitious, and fearless adventurer, but sadly, these traits would spell his demise. His first expedition to South America was in 1906 to map an unexplored part of Brazil and Bolivia at the request of the Royal Geographic Society. So, between 1906 and 1924, Percy went on 7 expeditions to the jungle. His last expedition was in search of the lost city of Z, from which he never returned. Percy went with his son Jack deep into the jungle in search of a lost civilization, and nobody knows what happened to them. The last communication from Percy was on May 29, 1925. He telegraphed his wife, letting her know that he and their son were about to go into dark jungle territory. However, some claim that they saw Percy in the years that followed. Expeditions were sent into the jungle to find the remnants of his crew. In 1928, G.M. Diet tried to uncover evidence of what happened to Percy and Jack. Sadly, though, it was no use. They were officially declared dead in 1937. There have been unsubstantiated rumors of artifacts being found from his last expedition. By unsubstantiated, I mean there is no proof that these things were ever really found. One object that was discovered was supposedly his machete. It was found lodged into a tree in Cuiabá, Brazil. There are also rumors that his personal camera was uncovered in the jungle, and that the undeveloped photographs revealed the truth about his expedition. The belief is that he was killed by a cannibalistic tribe, and that perhaps there were photographs of his last moments, but they were either lost or purposely destroyed before they could become public. And now for number 7. But first, it's shout-out time! I wanted to give a huge thank you to the Barnes family for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you are new here for more videos like this. Number 7. The Dwarfy Stain. One of the most mysterious artifacts in Scotland is the Dwarfy Stain. It's located on the mystical island of Hoy, a place devoid of people with a long and ancient history. The enormous stone is in the middle of a windswept land of nothing. The island is only home to short grass, sprawling hills, and beautiful views you can't get anywhere else in the world. Then, in the middle of this serene scene, is a single giant piece of red sandstone called the Dwarfy Stain. The Dwarfy Stain was carved about 5,000 years ago to make a tomb. Somebody took the enormous chunk of sandstone and transformed it using nothing but stone tools. Although it's been studied relentlessly by archaeologists and historians, the Dwarfy Stain is still an enigma. Sure, it was used as a tomb at some point, but nobody knows what its original purpose was, or who in the world made the thing. The best guess experts have is that the stone was hollowed out around 3000 BC using basic tools and physical strength. It's 28 feet long, 13 feet wide, and just over 8 feet tall. The whole thing wasn't hollowed out either. It was just a big enough chamber to presumably lay a corpse inside. It took great patience and precision, but why would anyone want to do this? Scientists have never been able to come up with the identity of the person who was first put in the tomb. There is also a local legend that the tomb was made by giants, though the chamber inside would hardly fit an oversized human. Number 6. The out-of-place head. What would you think if a Roman statue was discovered in Mexico? Could it be proof that the Romans reached the Americas centuries before Christopher Columbus? That's the big question that surrounds an unexplainable artifact known as the Tecashik-Calixtlahuaca head. Catchy name, right? The head was uncovered in a burial sometime between 1476 and 1510. But nobody knows where the rest of the statue is. Only its head was uncovered inside the grave along with some other treasures. It's amazing because the head doesn't look like any other artifact that's ever been found in Mesoamerica. The only things even remotely comparable are other stone heads that were created in the Roman Empire. The head came from a grave that was excavated in 1933 in the Toluca Valley, about 40 miles from Mexico City. It was the grave of a very important unknown person, hidden underneath a ruined pyramid. Other than the stone head, there were rock crystals, bones, pieces of pottery, and shards of turquoise and gold. The head was so shocking that archaeologist José García Payón didn't even mention it in his records. He didn't publish anything about it in 1960 because even he thought it was a hoax. When he eventually released the information, though, it led to widespread speculation, which he knew it would. In 2001, Romeo H. Christov from the University of New Mexico teamed up with some specialists to analyze the head. They concluded that the head was made by the Romans in the 2nd century AD. This was then confirmed by Bernard André from the German Institute of Archaeology in Rome. But how did a Roman statue make it into the grave of someone in Mexico buried under a pyramid? That's the baffling question that scientists have never been able to answer. Maybe the Romans did arrive in Mexico before Columbus. Or perhaps the statue was put in the grave by someone as a prank. Maybe someone on the team excavating the tomb thought it might be funny. What do you think? Number 5. The Archoraptor. In 1999, National Geographic announced that the link between dinosaurs and birds was finally discovered. It was a big day for the paleontological community. The small bird fossil went on display at a show in Tucson, Arizona. It had the distinct tail of a dinosaur, but had the arms of primitive birds. In other words, it had features from both prehistoric dinosaurs like velociraptors and features from some of the earliest birds to evolve. The fossil was discovered in China's Liaoning province. It seemed to the world that the missing link would finally be revealed, and researchers named the mysterious creature Archoraptor. Even after its initial discovery, paleontologists thought it was too good to be true. It was exactly what had been hypothesized, a missing link between two very different types of animals. And when scientists started to investigate where it came from, they realized it was indeed too good to be true. The fossil was purchased by Steven Zirkus for $80,000. He wanted to use the fossil for his new museum in Utah, but before he put it on display, he wanted the fossil to be properly studied. That was where Phil Curry and Chris Sloan of National Geographic came in. They examined the fossil, determined it was real, and wrote an article about it. The fossil was also sent back to China to be analyzed by paleontologist Xu Xing. And that was when the red flags started to be raised. X-rays revealed a bizarre assemblage of bones that didn't make any sense. The bones looked like they were from a variety of different specimens. And sure enough, Archoraptor was proven to be fake. It was a composite fossil, a phony put together using bones of dinosaurs and birds. It was made of 88 separate pieces of two distinct creatures, Microraptor and Yanornis. At the time, these species were totally new to scientists. The reason Archoraptor seemed like a missing link was that it was made from half of a dinosaur and half of an ancient bird. It was an embarrassment to National Geographic, who was forced to retract the article and admit they made a mistake. But who was responsible for the fakery? Nobody knows exactly, but there is a possible scenario. It was likely created by farmers in rural China who often sold composite fossils to supplement their income. They were really good at it, so much so that they were able to trick National Geographic. Number 4. Merlin's Tomb. In the wild forest of Paimpont, France, there is a megalithic monument dating from a time unknown. It's called Tombeau de Merlin, or Merlin's Tomb, and scientists say it dates back to the Neolithic period. Others, however, say the stone marks the exact place where Merlin was buried during the Dark Ages. By Merlin, I'm referring to King Arthur's wizard. The mysterious monument is the defining feature of the forest, and its existence has been known since at least the 12th century. That was when the rumors of the wizard's grave spread throughout France. Unfortunately, though, the tomb suffered at the hands of grave robbers around 1889. They destroyed most of the site in their search for Merlin's treasure. And because the robbers did so much damage, scientists don't even know what they took away with them. Maybe they found Merlin's crystal ball, or perhaps they didn't find anything. Unfortunately, there's no way to know for sure. Scientists have done extensive research on the monument. Felix Bellamy said there were originally 2 graves, but one of them was already in ruins by the time grave robbers showed up in the 19th century. Other than that, archaeologists know very little about the site. More is known about it in the legends. According to the tale of Sir Lancelot, Merlin withdrew from King Arthur and the world at large when he fell in love with the fairy Vivian. He ran away to the forests of Paimpont, where he was eventually buried. Merlin may not have been a wizard who could shoot lightning from his hands, but there are scholars who think he was the real advisor of King Arthur. The jury is still out, but it's definitely a possibility. Number 3. The Lost Aztec Statue. The year 1824 was an interesting time for the British Empire. Napoleon had died very recently, and the Battle of Waterloo was waged less than a decade before. George IV sat on the throne, and Queen Victoria was only Princess Alexandrina Victoria, a 5-year-old girl at the time. It was a time in which the people of London were becoming more and more fascinated with the exotic parts of the world. Those with money, like William Bullock, were collecting artifacts from around the globe and exhibiting them in their personal collections. Many of the greatest relics were taken at this time by wealthy British and are still hidden away in secret collections. William Bullock was obsessed with Aztec treasures. At his exhibition in 1824, artist Agostino Aglio accurately depicted the scene. He made a piece of art showing the exhibition hall and all the artifacts of importance that were on display. This central circular object in the picture is easily identifiable as the Aztec sunstone. The picture also shows the famous statue of the Aztec goddess Coatlicue, who's said to have given birth to the moon and the stars. The enormous statue is still around today, looking exactly like it does in Aglio's picture. Yet the picture shows one thing that nobody can explain. On the left side of the picture is an enormous statue of a serpent. All the relics in the picture are accounted for except the preposterously large snake statue. Nobody knows what it is. There were other pictures made of Bullock's expedition, and all of them show the enormous snake statue. This thing was clearly present at the show. The problem is that there is no mention of it anywhere else. There is no clue as to where it went or where it came from. Some speculate it was taken from Mexico and is currently stored in a secret vault somewhere in London. It might not even be Aztec, but rather a giant monolith stolen from an unknown culture. Number 2. The hole in the Sphinx. It's difficult to find an artifact that's more iconic and mysterious than the Great Sphinx of Egypt. The enormous monument is said to be 4,500 years old, built around the same time as the Pyramid of Khufu behind it. That being said, very little is known about its history. Some have suggested the Sphinx was built thousands of years before the pyramids by an unrelated culture. Damage to the lower portion of the Sphinx suggests it lived through a flood. The interesting part is that the damage on the Sphinx isn't found on the pyramid, which should mean the Sphinx was built first. This is all just speculation because mainstream scientists have never proven the flood theory. There could be even more mysterious artifacts buried beneath the Sphinx. Historian Dr. Bettany Hughes recently claimed that there are chambers underneath the statue that could lead to treasure. There's a small hole at the base of the statue that most people never notice. It's a deep hole near the tail that Bettany claims leads to a series of tunnels that snake beneath Giza. Nobody knows where the tunnels end, but there are a lot of theories. In fact, the theories have been around for a long time. In ancient Egypt, locals respected and feared the Sphinx, believing it had supernatural powers. In the early 20th century, American oracle Edgar Cayce claimed to have had a vision of an ancient library hidden beneath the statue. He called it the Hall of Records, saying it contains evidence of Egypt's history with extraterrestrial beings. In 1998, Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities even excavated underneath the main body of the Sphinx. They supposedly found tunnels leading to what looked like a natural cave, but nothing was found and the endeavor was abandoned. At least that was according to the Egyptian authorities. But many believe they really did find something. They just decided to cover it up. Now the authorities won't let anyone dig underneath the ancient artifact to see what it's protecting. It could be that it's just unsafe to be digging beneath the massive artifact, or maybe there's something else going on. What do you think? Number 1. The Cardiff Giant. George Hull was a cigar maker by trade in the 1860s. He was an atheist, a businessman, and a person who despised religious zealots. In 1867, he encountered a revivalist preacher during a trip to Iowa. He was astounded by the preacher taking the Bible's passages literally, in particular the passage in the book of Genesis that explains how giants existed on Earth. Then, later that night, as he lay in bed, George began cooking up a plan. Over the next 2 years, George spent $3,000, which was a ton of money in the 1860s, to bring about a giant. In Fort Dodge, he secured a block of gypsum. He said he was going to use it to build a statue of Abraham Lincoln, but instead, he shipped the slab to Chicago and paid someone to sculpt a statue of a giant. Workers at the marble dealership in Chicago used sulfuric acid to give the statue an aged and eroded appearance. When all was said and done, George had a fake colossus that stood 10 feet tall and weighed 3,000 pounds. Next, George traveled to Cardiff, New York. In a small valley, he buried the enormous giant underneath a friend's barn, who was sworn to secrecy. It was wedged underneath roots, giving it the illusion that it had been in the dirt for thousands of years. Then, a year later, George gave the go-ahead for his friend to hire some workers to dig a well at the exact place they buried the giant. And soon enough, America had a shocking discovery on its hands. A group offered $30,000 for the statue. James Hall, a geologist for New York State, then confirmed the statue to be a fossilized giant. Professor Henry Ward from Rochester University also confirmed it to be a fossilized giant. But after a few months, everything eventually unraveled. Yale paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh declared it a fake. Still though, George and his friend got rich off the phony giant, and scientists all over the US were embarrassed for supporting their discovery. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Stone Age Blade. In 2016, a nearly 1,000-year-old copper-ended blade was found in a remote patch of ice in the Yukon. Archaeologist Greg Hare was traveling with a documentary film crew in a helicopter over patches of ice when they spotted a herd of caribou. When the film crew got out of their helicopter, they spotted an antler arrow point half buried in the ice. After carefully removing it, they ended up discovering a copper blade attached to the end. Hare said that if it hadn't been for the caribou, they never would have stopped there. One of the oldest copper elements ever discovered in the Yukon, it is believed it was used as a throwing dart to hunt the same caribou that took refuge on the ice patches to get away from insects. The arrowhead is so old that it is considered one of the first examples of bow and arrow technology used as the main weapon by indigenous hunters. It was dated to about 936 years old. Copper only appeared in the Yukon about 1,000 years ago, so it is probably at the very beginning of this new bow and arrow, which replaced the atlatl, the throwing dart. Maybe this arrow belonged to one of the first creative hunters. Made from a copper nugget that is 99.9% pure, the arrowhead is believed by scientists to have been made from copper recovered from one of the creeks in southwest Yukon, making it not only a remarkable example of early technology, but also a look into the past of the First Nations people. Indus Valley Civilization. The ancient cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro have been excavated and studied for over 100 years. These places were once home to an advanced civilization dating back to 3300 BC. Mohenjo-Daro, whose name means Mound of the Dead, was once a major urban center, but in the 1920s, when several excavations took place, the existence of one of the oldest highly advanced civilizations revealed an astonishing collection of artifacts, relics, and ruins that were far ahead of their time. They had organized irrigation for farming as well as a way to control the annual floods that would happen along the river. Archaeologists have found complex infrastructure to handle the area's water supply, as well as disposal systems like sewers. There were hundreds of houses with indoor toilets, large buildings and elaborate streets protected by large walls. We're talking about indoor toilets already being around thousands of years ago, with a connection to covered drains outside. When the civilization fell, so did this practice. I can't believe sanitary engineering existed so long ago, can you? Their advanced technologies for the water supply and disposal systems showed that people here took public health very seriously, with an impressive bathhouse that had an innovative steam bath and hot air heating system. Besides that, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro used standardized weights and measurements, metalwork, seals to identify property, and pottery using the wheel. They may have even discovered the number 0 and invented a decimal system. Believed to have used these technologies long before Egypt and Mesopotamia, the Indus River Valley was, at the time of discovery, one of the greatest archaeological examples of the ancient world. London Hammer. In 1936, a couple in London, Texas were out walking when they discovered a strange-looking hammer embedded in a rock. Actually, they just found a handle in a rock, took it home, and it wasn't until their son cracked it open in 1947 that they discovered that there was a hammer attached to the handle. Somehow the rock had grown over the hammer, something that seems impossible. So of course, they thought the hammer must have existed first and then the rock. The rock was determined to be Ordovician rock from between 65 and 135 million years ago, way before humans were even around. And this type of hammer wasn't made until the 1800s. But the scientific community kept asking, how can a modern instrument be encased in ancient rock? Since it was first discovered, the hammer has not rusted and the wooden handle was starting to show traces of carbonization. The problem? The owner of the hammer, Carl Baugh, has only had private testing done and has not published any results. Scientists and geologists say that many so-called out-of-place artifacts like this one are a result of concretion, the process of where sediments and minerals will form around objects or create strange objects themselves. Carl Baugh says that this hammer is proof of an ancient people that came way before humanity, and you can apparently see the hammer at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. What do you think about this ancient hammer? Is it a piece of lost technology from ancient humans, or did it get stuck in a geological process? Let me know in the comments below. 19th century artificial limb. Could this 19th century artifact made of steel and brass be the first artificial limb ever created? Located at the London Science Museum, the unusual prosthetic arm moves at the elbow joint with a spring as well as at the wrist, which can rotate and move up and down. The fingers can also curl up and straighten out. After the Napoleonic Wars, amputations became widespread and the need for prosthesis more common. With various sculptors and surgeons working to find solutions for those who needed it, working arms and legs with springs for movement were invented. So where did this artificial arm originate? Believed to have been created between 1850 and 1910, the prosthesis affixes to the upper arm via a leather piece. While most prosthetics are usually more functional, this one is quite fashionable with its intricate construction and even decorative details. Could the fingers actually grasp and hold things? Did it offer precise motion? Probably not, but totally love the steampunk aesthetic. Part of a collection at the Science Museum's History of Medicine collection, even though it might not have worked so well, it would have been a work of art to wear, and instead of hiding it, it was most likely a conversation piece. Whoever made it or used it was probably a very interesting person. And now for number 5, but first, big shout out to VS. Hopefully everyone is doing well out there, and to Jaden Morales. Stay safe and healthy, everyone. The Baghdad Battery. Throwback to the early days of this channel. You guys remember this one? In 1938, just outside Baghdad in modern-day Iraq, archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig unearthed a clay jar with a copper cylinder encasing an iron rod. It showed signs of corrosion and revealed that an acidic agent such as vinegar had been used. For Koenig, it was a battery. Since then, a dozen of these containers have been found, and they are all shrouded in mystery. Archaeologists, historians, metallurgy experts, chemists, geologists have all been fascinated by these curious artifacts. Standing around 6 inches high, each of the pots contained cylinders that had been soldered with an alloy and topped with copper discs. Inside, iron rods were suspended in the center of the copper cylinders, resembling present-day dry cells. No two stories about the battery's provenance are the same. Until 2003, the original Baghdad Battery was located at the National Museum of Iraq, but was sadly looted along with thousands of other artifacts during the war. Perhaps the Parthians or the Sassanids created this battery 2,000 years before electric cells were invented, but there is no other archaeological evidence to support it. Regardless of whether on purpose or not, these ancient batteries do produce a small electric current. The show Mythbusters built a replica that worked, producing 1 to 2 volts of electricity. A group of students at Smith College in the US also created a replica that produced 0.8 to 2 volts of electricity. So that begs the question, what did ancient people need a battery for? It's very hard to say, but they actually do work. The issue is that nobody has found any wires. It is possible that the batteries were used for electroplating, transferring a thin layer of metal onto another metal surface. An expert at the Department of Scientific Research at the British Museum, Dr. Paul Craddock, proposed the cells were connected together and placed inside a metal statue, which would produce a small electric shock for worshippers who touched the idol. He believed that the strange tingling sensation would cause worshippers to believe in the evidence of power and magic. Whatever the true purpose of the Baghdad Battery, in the words of Dr. Craddock, these objects belong to the successors of the people who made them. Let's hope the world manages to resolve its present problems so people can go and see them. still as true today as ever. Earthquake detector. While monitoring the weather and earthquakes might only seem possible with modern technology, turns out that we were already able to detect earthquakes 2,000 years ago. Invented in China, this beautiful work of art is actually a seismometer or a seismoscope. It detects and measures seismic waves coming from an earthquake, volcanic eruption, you name it. Zhang Heng lived in China during the Han Dynasty nearly 2,000 years ago. An astronomer, mathematician, scientist, and engineer, he is credited for inventing this classy scientific instrument. It was introduced to the imperial court in 132 AD. Historical depictions of the seismoscope show it as a large bronze instrument shaped like an urn or a vase. Mounted on the outside were 8 dragons, each holding a bronze ball in its jaw and pointing in the cardinal directions. The construction of the seismoscope is still a bit fuzzy, but scientists believe the hollow body contained a pendulum and levers connected to the dragons that would detect an earthquake by causing the pendulum to swing. Also on the outside of the device were bronze toads located at north, south, east, and west points on the sculpture. The dragon would drop a ball into the toad's mouth depending on which area the earthquake occurred, providing government officials a location to send aid. It was believed to be highly accurate and could detect earthquakes from very far away, not just where it was located. Initially met with skepticism, Heng's invention made him unpopular with his peers, but years later, one of the balls dropped into one of the toads' mouths. At first, no earthquake had been felt in the capital, so his critics were proven correct. Ha! Until a few days later, when a messenger arrived to report an earthquake had occurred in the direction that the now empty dragon mouth faced. Whoops! In 2005, a group of seismologists and archaeologists at the Chinese Academy of Sciences created a functioning replica. It contained a pendulum that was suspended above a ball perched on a thin pedestal. When the pendulum swung, it would nudge the ball into one of the 8 channels and trigger a system that animated the external dragon's mouth. No one knows whether this is how Zhang's model worked, but the seismoscope, now 2 millennia old, had the same working principle to detect earthquakes that still remains commonly used today. And we still can't predict earthquakes yet. World's first computer. The Antikythera mechanism is a 2,000-year-old computer that changed our understanding of human history. On the Greek island of Antikythera, an archaeologist sifting through objects found in a 2,000-year-old shipwreck discovered a number of treasures. But among the beautiful vases, jewelry, and bronze statues, the discovery of brass gears and dials mounted in a case the size of a mantel clock would change the way we look at history forever. Dubbed the Antikythera mechanism after the island, this ancient Greek technology is believed to be the world's first computer. It had at least 24 gears laid neatly on top of one another, calibrated with the precision of a Swiss watch. This ability was dated to around the 16th century, not to before the 1st century. In 1959, Princeton science historian Derek DeSoya Price analyzed the contraption, coming to the conclusion that it was some sort of clock, calendar, or calculating device. The historian believes that its gears were used to predict the position of planets and stars in the sky depending on the month. There was one main gear that moved to represent the calendar year, and one could turn and move its many smaller gears to represent the motion of planets, the sun, and the moon. With its code written into the mathematical ratios of its gears, users could enter the main date on one gear, and by turning the others, the mechanism could calculate the angle of the sun crossing the sky. More recently, thanks to modern X-ray and 3D mapping technology, researchers were able to find a text written in Greek with an instruction manual on how to use it. How often does that happen? With dials and clock faces, each with a different function for measuring movements of the planets, all were operated by one main crank. Since nothing comparable in its known form has been found in any ancient scientific text, scientists still don't know who made it or used it. How they put it together is another mystery. There is nothing else like it in the world. Hypoc Cost. Over 2,000 years ago, the ancient Romans invented the world's first indoor heating system. Known as a Hypoc Cost, the system was only used by wealthier residents. By embedding tubes in the walls of homes, heat could be directed and spread throughout the house. It was mostly used in local public bathhouses, moving the warm air around the building under floors and between walls. Floors were constructed on top of pillars made from brick, mortar, or concrete so the warm air had space to circulate. Slaves of residents were in charge of keeping the fires blazing to heat the air. But when the Roman Empire started to decline, public baths started to fall into ruin, and the Hypoc Cost fell out of regular use. Still found throughout parts of Europe where the Roman culture once flourished, the heating system was used into the early Middle Ages and was the birth of indoor central heating. The Cyrus cylinder. This relic from ancient Persia is made of baked clay and was found buried in the foundations of a building in ancient Babylon. It dates back 2,500 years ago to 539 BC, when the king of Persia, Cyrus the Great, conquered Babylon, effectively ending the Babylonian Empire. It is a type of royal inscription declaring what the king of Persia would do with the conquered people. The king announces that he will set them all free and allow people to resume their lives and religions to worship the gods in their own way and in their own temples. This is considered the first bill of human rights and had an enormous influence on the founding fathers as they were writing the Declaration of Independence for the United States. Different from all other ancient relics and objects at the time, this cylinder is a symbol of ruling with tolerance and freedom. The Persian Empire became the first empire to accommodate people from many different languages and faiths. It becomes a point of reference for future generations on how to rule a society full of people with different backgrounds, cultures, and religions without constant fighting. A replica of the Cyrus cylinder is kept at the United Nations headquarters in New York on the second-floor hallway as a symbol of the past and of the future. Thanks for watching! Which artifact was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye!